That miraculously splendid music theory show.
This is a whiteboard.
It has many sets of 5 lines. One such set is called a music staff. Many of them are referred to as staves. In these lines, we write our little black dots called notes. These notes have a certain pitch or frequency. The lower a note notated, the lower it's going to sound. The higher it's notated relative to these 5 lines, the higher it's going to sound. A note can be written exactly on a line in the middle or in the space between 2 lines. The totality of lines and spaces is called positions. In music, there's an alphabet, also referred to as the natural notes. That's a sequence of 7 letters, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and these 7 notes are equivalent to the white keys on a piano. This sequence of notes keeps repeating itself 1 octave higher, and when we play this sequence of notes up and down in order, we get the C major scale, something every piano student has to learn. The first note you should memorize instantly is the so-called middle C, aka C4. Looks like that. In order to find every C on a piano keyboard, you can use the 2 black keys as orientation. But how exactly do we know which note is meant when it's written somewhere?
There are so many notes on the piano, how would we possibly write them all in one staff?
That's where the so-called clefs come in. The clef is a symbol that goes at the beginning of every staff. This symbol is the so-called treble clef. It denotes the G, the next G above middle C. This is middle C, and the treble clef sort of has a circle. It encircles a particular line, the second line from below, and on this line sits the G, and it's G4, the G above middle C. That's why the treble clef is also called G clef sometimes. Let's notate some natural notes in the treble clef, starting with C4, obviously.
C, D, E, F, G, A, B.
Then the sequence repeats itself 1 octave higher. C, D, E, F, G. And it keeps going on like this endlessly. As you can tell, the middle C looks a bit different from the other ones because it has a line through it. That's a so-called ledger line. Ledger lines come into play when the note that has to be notated is too low or too high to fit within the 5 lines. It's sort of a fragment of an imaginary additional line. There can be as many ledger lines as you want, but at some point they get very ugly and hard to read, so we have different clefs for the high notes and the low notes. The next clef you should be familiar with is the so-called bass clef or F clef. The bass clef has 2 dots, and on the line that runs exactly between those 2 dots, there lies the F. It's the next F below middle C. In the bass clef, middle C is notated on the ledger line, on the first ledger line above the 5 lines. So this note sounds identical to this note. Alright, let's notate some natural notes in the bass clef. The sequence of natural notes is an ascending sequence. So when we write them in the other direction, we're going to have to read the letters front to back. So that's C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C, B, A, G.
And so on.
The distance from one note name to the next identical note name is called an octave. This C is 1 octave lower than this C. This C is 1 octave higher than this C, for example. Octo is the Greek word for 8, and it's called octave because the distance spans 8 letter names. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are also additional symbols that tell you to transpose a note that's written somewhere up an octave or down an octave. 8VA followed by a dotted bracket tells you to play this note 1 octave higher than it's written. Every note under this bracket has to be played 1 octave higher. Same goes for transposition 1 octave lower, which looks like this. This 8VB and a dotted bracket below the note. This should be played 1 octave lower, which would be this G. When it says 15MA, you should play the note or notes 2 octaves higher. When it says 15MB, it should be 2 octaves lower. Depending on how low or high a note is, it gets a different label. Middle C is C4, as we said before. The next C 1 octave higher is C5, then comes C6, C7, and so on. The lower octaves are C3, C2, C1 and C0. And all of the notes in between two Cs get the same label as the first C in the sequence of natural notes. So that would be C4, D4, E4, E4, right up to B4, then comes C5, D5, E5, and so on.